My name is Jerry Masiolo. I'm the media director for the Polyvgal Institute. And with us today is Amanda Armstrong, esteemed author of Healing Through the Vagus Nerve. I'm still letting people in, but Amanda, if you want to say hello and take it from here a little bit, I'll be your support person today.
Yeah,
I will say,
absolutely.
we're asking everyone to please mute your mics. I'll let Amanda address how she would like to take questions, but if you have any questions that you would like to type to me so I can ask, please do so in chat or the Q&A function below.
Amazing. Welcome, everyone. This is such a huge room, and I know there are those of you from all over the world here too. I am coming in from Alexandria, Virginia, so just outside Washington, D.C. in the United States. I've been here 6 years. I'm just starting to claim it as home. California is where I was born and raised, and those are hard roots to give up for me. I'm definitely a sunshine girl. But today I am here to talk about my book, Healing Through the Vagus Nerve. This is something I am so proud of, mostly because of the story behind the story that's written here, and the stories that I've heard from so many practitioners, as well as just individuals who are struggling, who have found some hope and some healing in these pages. And I can't wait to share that with all of you. So the structure of the presentation today is going to be me kind of going in and out of the book a little bit, sharing a little bit about the work that I do in the world, how I work with clients. And for questions, I would love for the chat to be a place that's open throughout the presentation. And I'm also going to reserve time at the end for a Q&A. One of my favorite things about connecting live with folks is that I actually get to make the information I'm sharing personally applicable. We will be doing some practices as well. So if you're looking around your space, I might invite you to just stand up, touch your toes at some point. Nothing's going to be any big movement. Everything is optional. Everything is invitational, allowing your systems really to guide this today. But I'm going to jump into a presentation. I will likely come in and out of slides. I just don't like to stare at slide decks for long extended periods of time. So I'm going to keep this as human as possible. So we're going to low tech, we're going to scroll through all of this together. So this is an author talk with me on my book, and a little bit about me. I am the founder of Rise as We. So that's my mental health coaching practice. And we specialize in working with individuals struggling with anxiety and depression. So really helping those struggling with anxiety and depression understand it through a nervous system lens, gain a brand new context for maybe my symptoms make sense. Maybe I am not broken. Maybe this isn't the way that I am. I don't have to live like this forever. But through the polyvagal theory and other methodologies that we use in our practice, and what this book really aims to help people understand is that all of your symptoms make sense when you can understand them through the nervous system based on your past lived experiences and your current life circumstances. And when we can settle into that place, that opens up a lot of compassion and strategy for healing in what I call kind of a whole human, whole life approach. And so, I'm the author. I'm the host of Regulate and Rewire, which is a top 100 mental health podcast. I have a master's in kinesiology and exercise psychology, and that's where this really started. My research there was on looking at the overlap between movement, social support, and depression. Long before ever hearing about the polyvagal theory, I was studying it. I was looking at co-regulation and social support. I was looking at the way that our physiology drives our psychology and the way that they are all interconnected. And before running my practice full time, I worked at Google headquarters in their corporate wellness sector for a handful of years. And before I move on, I want to read to you just this first paragraph of the introduction of my book to set the context and give you a sneak peek in the book. It says, "I'll never forget the feeling I had the first time one of my clients said, 'Oh my gosh, I'm not broken. This all makes perfect sense.' I have since seen this incredible aha moment hit for hundreds of clients, and it never gets old. I find it fascinating that most often it comes not from years of therapy or big life changes, but from simply beginning to understand how their nervous system works. Once the nervous system comes into focus, they realize their anxiety, their depression, their symptoms are a natural result of their past lived experiences and current life stressors. This realization brings compassion and curiosity and paves the way for some of their deepest healing. And so that is my hope within this book. As you'll see, this book is a very visually guided book. There's an incredible woman in the UK who illustrated this book for me. And the purpose in this book being written in the format that it was is that it felt good to be in, that it felt accessible to the everyday person, something that would call to them with hope on their shelves, as well as be informative for maybe more traditionally trained therapists who aren't as well versed in polyvagal theory or the role that the nervous system might play in the symptoms that clients are seeking out their support for. And I've heard from at least, I can think, 8 or 9 therapists in the last couple months who have offered this as a reference point to their clients. And so what I'm really proud of is that I've created a versatile resource that can serve both the person struggling and then the people who are here to serve and support the people who are suffering. I believe in experiential education as often as possible. And so what I am going to invite all of you to do with me to illustrate just how quickly, when we have an understanding of how our physiology works, how the vagus nerve works, how our nervous system works, our system can shift. So this is an assess reassess process. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to have you stand up if you are willing and able or you desire to, and reach for your toes. You're not going to force reach for your toes. You're just going to let your body kind of just hang. And what you're going to take note of is range of motion and tension. So how far can I reach and where's the tension? How much tension is there? Then we're going to sit back here together. I'm going to guide you through a lateral eye stretch. And then we're going to reassess. And we're just going to notice if anything changed. Is there more or less tension, increase or decrease in range of motion? If standing and reaching for your toes is not physically accessible to you, another range of motion assessment you can do is either a head turn or a head tilt. So just, again, noticing range of motion or tension. Okay, I am going to not move my equipment very far, but you can imagine we're all going to stand up together. And then just reaching forward. So take about 10, 15 seconds there. Again, not forcing the reach. Just noticing range of motion, tension. And then we're going to come back here together. And what we're going to do next is we're going to inhale together. And as we exhale, your head and face is going to stay forward. Your eyes are simply going to shift. We're going to hold that for about 3 or 4 breaths, come back and do the other side. So wherever you are, let your system settle, letting out your air. We'll take a big breath in. Eyes gaze to the right. And just continue a normal breathing pattern here. Face and head stay facing forward. We're just doing a lateral eye stretch. With your next inhale, let your eyes reset center. Maybe blink a little bit, take a reset breath. Then we're going to inhale and shift your gaze to the opposite direction. Just holding this lateral eye stretch here. Then with your next breath, resetting forward. And then I want to invite you to restand and reassess. And then notice increase in range of motion or decrease, increase or decrease in tension. Does anything change for you? And then I want you to drop in the chat what you noticed. Was it the same? Did your range of motion shift? Did any tension shift? So I'm going to give you just a moment to get some answers in the chat, and then I'm going to talk to you about what and why. And this is a process that I go into a lot more detail about in chapter 6 in the book, why we assess, reassess, what it does. Okay, huge increase in range of motion, a little less tension in my back. Same, crazy. I went so much deeper. The same, neck tension almost gone. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Wow. What's happening? What about moving your eyes made your hamstrings more flexible? Absolutely nothing. What you're seeing here is how quickly we can shift our system. When your nervous system likes something, it rewards you for it. And a way that it often rewards you for it is in an increase in range of motion or a decrease in tension. What you just did, while your vagus nerve doesn't directly innervate your eyes, this ocular reflex turns on your shifts you slightly more parasympathetic, which then kind of through a back door engages your vagus nerve and settles the system. So if you are somebody who did this drill and you saw an increase in range of motion or a decrease in tension, you would pocket this into your toolbox of this is a high payoff practice for me. This is a high payoff drill for me. This is something I can come to in moments of stress. If it was the same, okay, this one's neutral. Either I maybe needed to do it a little longer or less long. And if you had an increase in range of motion, no, a decrease in range of motion or an increase in tension, that's the way your nervous system is communicating. That didn't feel safe for us. We're actually layering in more protectiveness into the system. And what I love about this so much and starting this so much is that every single one of you has a little bit of buy-in to the rest of this conversation right now, especially if this was a positive payoff drill for you. And the same thing applies to, for those of you who are practitioners, to the clients that we work with. When we can invite them into these, not only number one is the thing that clients ask for most often in the work for me is tangible tools. Many of them have been in traditional talk therapy for a number of years and feel like while it's been measurably helpful, what I feel is often missing there is these tangible tools. I don't understand my nervous system. I don't understand how, when I'm on the verge of a panic attack, I can come back from that. I don't understand how I can feel anger and be with anger. I don't have the capacity for that without it becoming eruptive. And so one of the most foundational things that this book does and that I think is so important is giving people the understanding of how their nervous system works so that they can work with it. And the long and short of this is we can do that oftentimes through an assess, reassess process, just showing them how responsive our nervous system can be. So we're going to
Sorry to interrupt real quick.
yeah.
We have several questions about the eye movement. I don't know if you can see the chat or would you like me to read them to you? I thought you might just address them very quickly.
Yeah. What are some of the questions that you've seen?
Okay, so a couple people are talking about increased ROM, less tension, but could that simply be the result of repeating the exercise a second eye? Another person's asking, I've done this before, it always feel better, but I get a headache afterward. And someone else was saying, is this really the eye movement or just the fact that I paused and paid attention to my body? So they're all kind of related in my opinion.
Yeah. And this is where it's probably a both and. This is where the definitive answer that makes our system feel really good isn't there. And my practitioners and I often have a conversation around, is it that a certain drill gives them an increased range of motion or decreased activation, or is it that they paused and paid attention? And sometimes where we get is, does it matter? It invited you into a moment of interoceptive awareness. You felt your system shift. And in the work that we do with our clients, we go through this assess, reassess over weeks and months with our clients and find patterns. What we often find is patterns in practices that decrease or increase range of motion or tension to help them build out their toolbox. And from a practitioner standpoint, a lot of times our clients just need something to help them hit pause. And if this is a structure, a buy-in, an experience, Well, also, we do know that breathing in certain ways shifts our physiology. We do know, based on not just the vagus nerve being our 10th and longest cranial nerve, but our other cranial nerves, that when we move our eyes in certain ways, when we shift our vision field, that it impacts parts of the brain. It elicits a certain response that can change the way that we show up. And so, for the person who gets increased range of motion, but also a little headache after vision therapy drills, well, that's another symptom. That's another way that it's communicating. I would be curious if I were working with you. I would say, well, what if we try some other vision drills? What if we tried some eye push ups or some visual orienting? What if we did lateral eye stretches with your eyes closed versus open? What about in natural light versus artificial light? And gather information from your system around what feels good for your system in moments of activation or shutdown. And then for this question of, is it really the eye movement or just the fact that I paused and paid attention to my body? Maybe, maybe it was the eye movement. Maybe it was the moment to pause. And over time, as we do this assess and reassess, frequently enough, I would be curious if there was a pattern of particular practices, whether that's breath work or, more the self-touch, somatic practices, or vision therapy that really resonates consistently with your system. The other layer, the practical application of this, either as a person or a practitioner, is which of these practices makes sense in the context that you're experiencing activation or shutdown. You might love somatic shaking, but where you get the most anxious is in conversation with another person. Well, that's probably not going to be your go-to tool. So can we find another one that works in the context of situations that trigger you? Um, so I am going to jump back into the presentation and get a little bit more into the book and definitely field questions as we go. So because I know that people are coming in with a variety of background with the vagus nerve, briefly, what is the vagus nerve? This is something there's a whole chapter on in the book. It's the longest cranial nerve. It makes up a considerable amount of your parasympathetic nervous system. It is the nerve that carries the majority of the information from our brain to our body. So when this nerve is not optimal and functioning, we suffer mentally and physically. Vagal tone is a terminology that is used often in this book. It's something we'll use here. It refers to the activity and the health of your vagus nerve. So like muscle tone, high vagal tone indicates strong activity, while low vagal tone indicates weak activity. And then finally, vagal tone is linked to nervous system regulation. We usually measure vagal tone either based on symptom clusters or heart rate variability. And there is a whole chapter inside the book that talks about measuring your vagal tone based on these things. So chapter 4 gives you the options of measuring it through, it talks about what impacts your vagal tone, different lifestyle habits and experiences. And then it walks you through the various symptom clusters that you can assess, or as a practitioner, you can help your client assess. If you're checking a lot of these boxes, you likely have low vagal tone. Heart rate monitors. I have an Aura ring. There's whoop bands. There's a number of different health metrics that give you heart rate variability measures. Heart rate variability measures over time indicate an improving or a decline of vagal tone. And so there's a whole chapter there inside the book on measuring for people who are data driven. And I wanted to share just one study here. I referenced this in the book as well, that found that chronic vagus nerve stimulation significantly improves quality of life in treatment-resistant major depression. And so really just making a pitch here for the vagus nerve isn't an end-all be-all. There is no way that you can do enough ear or neck massaging, enough humming or gargling, which are all things that can stimulate and activate the vagus nerve, to be like the quick fix to something like anxiety or depression, but it is offering us a really beautiful, a ton of beautiful insight into the physiology behind some mental health conditions. So what I actually didn't realize I had in the presentation, so I'll come back here. was this question that Jerry and Caroline asked me to answer for all of you here as part of this author talk, which is why did I choose to write a book on this topic? And to be perfectly candid, my author experience was, I think, really unique in that a publisher approached me. So I had a publisher send me an email. Hey, we'd like to write a book on the vagus nerve. We've seen your content. I've looked at your website. I'd like to talk to you about it. So we got on the call and had a conversation. And I said, look, I will write a book that has vagus nerve in the title, but between its covers, what I need to have the freedom to write about is the entire nervous system, is to share the real life application. I said, what I cannot write is just another clinical textbook that tells people about all of the different segments of the vagus nerve without the practical application. My goal as an educator is to make really complex, complicated things accessible to the everyday person. And so what you find in as the chapters go through in my book is it starts with that big picture. He pushed me really hard to make the first chapter about the vagus nerve, but I said the vagus nerve doesn't mean anything without the context of the nervous system as a whole. And so chapter 1 is an overview of the autonomic nervous system, what it is, how to understand it. And in that, I share, and you'll see a page that looks like this. I know the text is small, but I wanted to bring you into the book in this presentation as much as possible. I like to teach in analogies. And so one of those that you see here is a functional understanding of the nervous system. Think of your nervous system like a computer that has a log of everything you've ever experienced from conception to today. Sure, it logs the good stuff, but the nervous system is hardwired for survival. So it puts a little red flag on all the files containing situations in your life where you felt unsafe, didn't get your needs met, experienced rejection or shame, and so on. It does this to make sure that if anything happens in your future that feels familiar to one of these past situations, you are more prepared. Now, in the present moment, your nervous system operates more like a lighthouse. Imagine that strong beam of light constantly scanning the environment. Your nervous system uses something called neuroception and is constantly scanning situations in your life and checking back with that database to see whether anything in your current situation or environment feels familiar to a time in your past when you didn't feel safe or get your needs met. Anytime something pings as familiar, your internal alarm system, aka your sympathetic state, gets triggered. This analogy in and of itself has been a moment of aha for a lot of our clients of I could go into depth, and the book does, in pages of like your parasympathetic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, here's how your pupils dilate and your organs shift in function, illustrating that we have very real, tangible physiological shifts based on what state our nervous system is in. But what I have found most helpful and what you will find throughout this book is the functional application of that. Your nervous system has logged every experience. And right now, your nervous system operates scanning inside, outside, and in between relationally. And if anything pings as familiar, we get triggered. This is so helpful for clients who are like, I felt like I just got triggered out of nowhere. Why did I have a panic attack out of nowhere? Why did I shut down out of nowhere? Oh, whether we cognitively recognize it or not, something felt familiar to your system. So what I want to chat through with all of you now is 3 concepts that are within the book. This is not the entirety of the book, but 3 things I want to touch on is number 1, the pyramid of healing. Number 2 is what I refer to as the stress bucket, and it's kind of parallel to nervous system mapping. And number 3 is proactive versus reactive, and the difference between proactive and reactive regulation, proactive and reactive engagement of your vagus nerve and vagal toning overall. And I want to give all of you here the context for some of what I'm sharing. I know that my audience here is people who are struggling themselves, people who are brand new practitioners, and people who are very, very well seasoned practitioners. And so in my presentation of these topics, I'm going to try to offer a perspective that can meet all of you where you are. So this is the 4-phase trauma-informed pyramid of healing that my practice operates from. And what it and the book takes clients through this journey, and the work that I do takes clients through this journey. What I found most often, what I found I was hearing most often from clients who came to us was that they were in a place where they were in talk therapy and they were getting amazing insight, and yet their life wasn't changing. Their anxiety symptoms were still just as high, or their depression was still just as low. And over years and years, I was able to articulate that oftentimes talk therapy jumps right in to the rewiring. And so what my practice does is it has a huge emphasis, and why I think I was a great candidate to write a book, in education. I'm an educator at heart, long and well before I became a practitioner. And what we have found is that when we can empower folks with the education to understand their nervous system, the role that it plays in how they feel and how they show up in their everyday life, everything changes. Their story about themselves changes. The story about their possibility of healing changes. And with that is the awareness of, here's how the nervous system works. Here's how your nervous system works. And my book operates the same. Here's how the vagus nerve operates. Can we assess your vagus nerve? Here's how the nervous system, let's assess that. And then comes the regulation. And regulation, like we'll talk about in a minute, I operate from two categories, the reactive and the proactive. Reactive meaning I need something right now that's going to help me increase my capacity, decrease my activation, elicit engagement if I'm in a shutdown or dissociative state. And so much confidence can come when we can help clients recognize and build out that toolbox of, here are the in the moment tools for when you need it most. And then my practice has a big emphasis, and this book also talks about, there's no amount of vagal toning exercises that are going to be able to outwork a really crappy lifestyle. If you are not sleeping enough, if you are eating terrible food, if your relationships feel toxic to you, if you're chronically stressed out, you're working 60 plus hours a week, work that doesn't feel fulfilling for you, there are basic habits that we have as humans that nurture our nature that are directly correlated with our vagal tone. And so oftentimes, I don't think we first need to rewire our negative belief that we established because of childhood trauma. I think sometimes the place that we need to start is, could you go on a 10-minute walk every day? Could we work on getting you just a little bit more rested? And so this regulation looks different for each of the people that we work with. And the book offers a lot of prompts to personalize how somebody might step into this with themselves. But we need to look at the proactive regulation of behavior change, shifting lifestyles, engaging in relationships that are more filling and co-regulating for you. And also, can we give our clients the tools they need in the moments that they need it most, with that context of why those tools work for them? Then when the system has capacity, when we've improved vagal tone, so your vagus nerve, vagal tone is directly linked to stress resilience. The higher your vagal tone, we know the more capacity you have for emotional regulation. The higher your vagal tone, typically you have decreased anxiety or depression symptoms, you have more cognitive focus. The higher your vagal tone impacts your ability to reset from stressful situations. So not only does it help you to not get stressed out as easily, but inevitably when you do pass threshold, when you have higher vagal tone, you can reset from that. If you're familiar with Deb Dana's polyvagal ladder, higher vagal tone helps you to move up into a state of regulation, that green zone, a little easier. And then resourcing. Resourcing is keep on keeping on. You found a new baseline. You have found new relationships or new habits that create an environment in which your nervous system can be more regulated. We're going to keep going. And inevitably, life's going to hand you something that feels overwhelming. You're going to have another pattern become more aware, and we're going to bump right back down to the bottom of this pyramid and cycle through it. But what we have found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients later is that when we jump into that rewiring, which, I mean, that's kind of the sexy healing work, right? We're like, we can rewire your brain. We can like repattern things. We can. And the system needs the capacity for that first. And so we've got to do these previous steps. And so my book talks you through this pyramid as well as this process. that not only informs how the book is written, how the book is prompted, but also the work that I do in the world as a practitioner. The other concept that the book goes into that I want to offer here is this combination of think about a nervous system ladder, if that's what you're familiar with. A lot of you I know are big Deb Dana fans in this community, and a stress bucket. So again, I teach in analogies. Your nervous system's a lighthouse. Well, now we're going to talk about your nervous system like it's a bucket. And I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So I want you to imagine that your nervous system's a bucket. We all know and understand that a bucket can only get so full before it is overflowing or so heavy that you can't pick it up. Now, I want you to imagine that you are at the top of a ladder, and I usually have a visual for this, but I don't. And on this ladder, there's the green zone of regulation, there's the yellow zone of activation, and there's the red zone of shutdown. So you and your bucket, you are standing at the top of the ladder. The water inside that bucket are life stressors. Again, inside, outside, or in between. They could be internal stressors. Maybe you've got some health things going on. They could be internal stressors, meaning thoughts and emotions. They could be external stressors, environmental toxins, clutter in your home, fluorescent lighting, or relationally, there's stressors there. But irregardless, when your bucket is light, when the stress load on your nervous system, the stress load that your vagus nerve is processing is light, you're at the top of the ladder, you're regulated. As that stress load gets heavier and heavier, it pushes you further and further down the ladder. Your nervous system's default response is sympathetic. And then when the stressors get too big or last too long, the system shuts down into that red zone state. And that, I would say, is maybe the second most impactful moment in this book and for the clients we work with is, oh my gosh, being able to articulate, what zone am I in? What state is my nervous system in? How do I know that I'm in that state? And then the follow-up is, what can I do to support myself in that state? Or if the desire is to shift into a different state, what does that look like? And so inside the book, it offers this visual here of that bucket pushing you down, down, and down. And then what it guides readers through is nervous system mapping. So this is something that if you have not done yourself, I would highly encourage. This is something that also, if you're a practitioner, it's so powerful to sit with our clients and do this with them in that co-regulated container. And what you're looking at right here is in that green zone. How do you know? How do you know you're in a regulated state? What are the sensations that you experience there, the emotions, the thoughts, and the behaviors? Similarly, when you're in that yellow zone, that activation, that sympathetic state, how do you know? A big part of this is helping the reader identify what state they're in and different ways of identifying what state they're in so that they can catch themselves slipping into that state sooner, assess whether they want to intervene sooner, and then as the book continues, gives you the tools to do something about it. So with this, I'm actually going to come off and just be a good old-fashioned reader. Something that I use a lot is this terminology called strategic healing. Healing can feel like a 1,000-piece puzzle. And so many of the folks who found this book, who come into my practice, are like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to start. And so we talk about this element of using the nervous system as a way to provide strategic healing. So this reads, you'll also learn a little bit about my history in the fitness world. Before establishing my full-time mental health coaching practice, I spent almost a decade as a personal trainer and wellness specialist, hence the various strength training analogies in this book. I consistently and strategically created specific workout programs based on my clients' goals, current fitness level, and lifestyle. I took into consideration any limitations they had and the resources that were available to them. These plans were strategic, but also flexible. The things would be adapted and changed based on what we observed was working or not working for one reason or another as the client progressed. I apply the same process now to the anxiety and depression coaching that I do. Although there are many universals in how to improve both physical fitness and mental health, there is always a need for personalization and adaptation. And this continues on to introduce what is on the next page, which is this concept of proactive versus reactive healing tools. And I we'll read. I think you have a context for the difference, but since this is an author talk, I'm going to read briefly what the book shares about the difference between reactive and proactive tools. In my coaching, we help clients create two distinct toolboxes, one for proactive tools and one for reactive tools. Too often in the support or messaging you get on a healing journey, there's an overemphasis on one of these categories or the other, and we need both. Proactive practices include consistent habits and lifestyle routines to improve vagal tone and create a life more suited for nervous system regulation. These are things you do proactively to decrease the likelihood of dysregulation or your symptoms showing up, including things like quality sleep, movement, stress management, vagal toning, and a relationship focus. Conversely, reactive practices are the in-the-moment regulation exercises that help you reverse the spirals of activation or shutdown. I'll also include that reactive practices also sometimes just help to create capacity to be with that experience, not necessarily to always fix it. And one of the things that you will find in the book is in chapter 6 is a place where I walk through various categories of practices. So there's a breath work section that talks about different breathing strategies and why they work. There's different massage techniques that innervate and activate the vagus nerve based on where it is close to the surface. And what you'll find here is, as a practitioner, a book that you can come to say, hey, let's sample, let's play, let's listen to our body a little bit. And I offer also the why these exercises work. Don't just sit here and rub your ear. Let me tell you why this might be helpful, why that might elicit a particular response for you. And the pages I want to share, these are going to be too small to read, is following that chapter. I have about a 3-page spread for tools specific to activation or specific to a shutdown state. Different tools work depending on the state your nervous system is in. Because remember, at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about how when you're in a parasympathetic state, your eyes are doing something different. Your breath rate is different. Your heart rate is different. And if we're trying to shift away from that, where we so often go wrong is if somebody's having a panic attack, we're like, take a deep breath. I don't think taking a deep breath has ever stopped somebody who's on the brink of a panic attack. Why? Because it doesn't meet the system where it is first. We do something called tool layering. This is why that nervous system mapping can be so helpful. And what I'll show you as like the final way to put all of this together is a worksheet that we have them do called a regulation game plan, where they identify, okay, your map says, how do you know you're in the yellow zone? But how do you know that you're at a level 1? How do you know that you're at a level 2? How do you know that you're on the brink of a panic attack? Because different tools are going to work depending on how sympathetic you might be. When we're in an activated state, the tools we want to reach for are ones that match our system's intensity and then slowly bring it to where we would prefer. So if I'm on the brink of a panic attack, I need to likely have a really low lift practice. Visual orienting can be really, really helpful when you're there. Or I'm going to intentionally hyperventilate, because if your client says, I start to hyperventilate, they're doing that automatically. Can you actually just bring intention to that? And then slow it down 1%, 1%, 1%. If their goal when they're hyperventilating is to take a deep breath, that's going to layer into the panic that they experience. And so what I think is one of the most helpful resources to bring this all together is there's a 3-page spread here that talks about tools for activation, that fight or flight response. If you are at a level 1 to 5, maybe try some of these. And if you're at a level 6 to 10, maybe try some of these. Similarly, tools for shutdown. And the shutdown state is different. And what I articulate, I think, really well in the book is helping you see that none of these states are wrong. It's about understanding the purpose behind it. The job of the shutdown state, that dorsal vagal state, is to disconnect you from any future harm. It's to numb you. It's to immobilize. So if it's to disconnect and immobilize, what are the most gentle ways that you can reconnect to yourself or to the environment? What are the most gentle ways in which you can mobilize the system? And oftentimes the vagus nerve is a way that we can do that. Telling somebody who's deeply shut down and dissociative, struggling with depression, that exercise helps depression is not helpful. While true, oftentimes not helpful. Their system doesn't have the capacity to, they'll just go to the gym with me. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Okay, well, the goal is to take one step towards mobilizing and connecting. What can I do to do that? What somatic practice? This is mobilizing. Doing a neck massage activates your vagus nerve. It's also connecting you because there's sensation to your body. What if you say, hey, 5 minutes of that a day, 30 seconds of that a day? Then we'll talk about if there's an eventual goal to get to the gym. But one of the things that I love is in this book, using the vagus nerve and understanding it as a focal point. I bring in the context for how to work with the whole system. And most importantly, how to meet your system where it is with the permission to move slowly, to heal slowly. And one of the worksheets that's offered in the book that I think adds strategy, gives our clients, gives us as people who are healing too, something to really work on and work through, is what I call a regulation game plan. And so what this looks like is very simply put at the top, and you could replace state with emotion. So you could put at the top, you could put yellow zone, green zone, red zone. You could put anger. If you are familiar with IFS, sometimes we'll do this with clients where they put the part there. Is that my eater part or my perfectionist part? And then in the left column, it's what is it like for me to be mildly, moderately, or very activated or shut down, blended with this part, whatever you want in that column. And then what are the tools or strategies or resources that I have? And we help them source not just for the vagal toning tools and resources, but other people, connecting resources, professional resources, personal resources, that can be part of this. And so my goal with this book was to be a beginner's guide as well as a kind of practitioner's toolkit. And it's so funny when I read the reviews about my book, they're everything from she didn't give enough information to there's way too much information to it's the perfect amount of information. Again, meeting readers where they are in navigating these. This book really is what you make of it, how you decide to use it. And I would love to offer just one more practice, one more assess, reassess, and then open it up to all of you. So what we're going to do this time, if you want to do the toe touch, you can. Maybe you want to do the head turn and tilt. One of my favorites is range of motion of my shoulder. So I'm going to do internal rotation. So your elbows will be at or just below, and we're rotating. We're looking for range of motion or tension. Okay, so just kind of noting. Cool. Then we're going to do what I've mentioned a couple times. We are going to do a combined ear and neck massage. So on your ear, finding either the back of your ear, maybe inside the bottom. Really, it's hard to go wrong here. We're just trying to move the skin. You're not doing a deep tissue ear massage. We're just kind of moving the skin, doing some circles. And when you feel ready to, I want to invite you to come down to what's called your sternocleidomastoid muscle. It's this chunky muscle running from your ear to your collarbone. You can give it a little pinch. You can kind of rub up and down. Again, we're just focused on moving the skin. This is a place where the vagus nerve innervates pretty close to the surface. And then when you feel ready to do so, we'll kind of switch to the other ear. Maybe some gentle ear tugs. And then coming down. Good. And then when that feels complete for you, I just want you to retest. Here. Noticeable improvement, increase, decrease. I got about 2 inches on either side here. I'm seeing some wide eyes. Amanda, this is witchcraft. Oh, it's vagal toning. Feels like witchcraft. You can drop in the chat And I would love, before we head into the Q&A portion, really quickly, just to get a pulse for where everybody is if in the chat you might drop, what have you learned today that's impacted you most? What is the most impactful part of today's presentation? What's your big or one small takeaway, either from what you experienced, a question that came up for you? Would love to know what impacted you most. Yeah. Okay. Lots of tension, the witchcraft. That reassess process, when I've mentored other practitioners, that's always their favorite thing to take away and to start to do with clients, is when they get a grasp for understanding that process. Yeah. How to organize all the techniques into different categories. Yeah, proactive and reactive. A lot of people proactive and reactive. Deborah said, I really liked your metaphors, starting with education and regulation to build my own and my clients' capacity. The colors chosen for states. Yeah. I would have clients choose their color. That's a fun adaptation. Yeah, have the clients choose their color. Permission to move slowly. Darn it, everything other people are writing. Amazing. So what I want to open it up to now is a Q&A. And the way that we'll run the Q&A is just dropping the questions in the chat, either directly to me if you'd like to stay anonymous. So I am, it looks like lowercase a, Amanda, capital case A. Or if you are comfortable sharing your question with the community, and just trying to offer as much feedback as I can to some of these questions. We'll probably have maybe 7-ish minutes worth of questions, and then I've got about a 1-minute closing for all of us. Okay. Mia asked, interested to know that the book includes techniques like massage, eye movements, and humming. Okay, awesome. Yep, the book's got those. Mala said, I have a question about serotonin in the gut and the brain. 90% produced in the gut and 10% produced in the brain. Because of the blood-brain barrier, serotonin in the gut can't transfer into the brain. But I saw something about the vagus nerve as a vehicle for serotonin to enter the brain. Can you clarify? Does serotonin transfer to the brain via the vagus nerve or not? Guys, coming in with these heavy hitters really fast. That is actually a question that I would need to humbly say I don't actually know specifically whether that serotonin transfers through the vagus nerve or not. So at the end of this, Mala, there's going to be a place where you can send me an email. If this is a discussion you'd have, I'm happy to research this and look into this. That's not something I have an immediate answer for you, though. Mia said, why does the massage work so incredibly well? So the ear and neck massage doesn't work incredibly well for everybody. For a lot of people it does. And it's because this is one of those places where the vagus nerve interplates close to the surface. So it's the same reason another vagal toning exercise is an abdominal massage. What we're doing is we're moving skin, we're moving the areas and manually stimulating the vagus nerve. When your vagus nerve is activated, it elicits a relaxation response in your body. It helps to shift you into a more parasympathetic regulated state. And so this is just one of the doors, one of the avenues in which we can do that. Another is deep, slow diaphragmatic breaths. So really quick, I'll put a plug in for this. Many of the clients that we work with are going to have short, shallow breathing patterns. When you have short, shallow chest breaths, none of those breaths stimulate or activate the vagus nerve. Think of how many breaths you take a day. Think of how many like bicep curls, if we're thinking about a rep to activate your vagus nerve, like a bicep curl, that a client or somebody is lacking due to dysfunctional breathing patterns. And so we'll work a lot of times with clients just on helping them have deeper diaphragmatic breaths become their default breath, because that's so many reps towards higher vagal tone, reps towards a more regulated system, that when that becomes their natural intuitive way to breathe, it just happens. They don't have to think about it. And so the massage works well because it's kind of a direct route to activating and stimulating the vagus nerve. Yeah. Okay, someone asked, what do you think about teaching spouses of sexual abuse survivors polyvagal tools? Does the survivor themselves have to self-regulate, or can the spouse, especially during intercourse, take on that burden? This is not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is anxiety, depression. And I have some thoughts in terms of it's a both and. I think in teaching individuals polyvagal tools, there breeds empowerment because they know when you think about assault, especially of this nature, there's a loss of body autonomy, there's a loss of body trust, there's a loss of body connection. Polyvagal tools, I think, invite in some autonomy. I can navigate my nervous system with agency. That's something that was taken from me at some point, while also having, even from just an anxiety standpoint, there are still days my system defaults towards activation. And my husband has now the polyvagal language. He's listened to enough of my podcast episodes that he will be able to reflect back. I feel like you're in the yellow. He knows that co-regulation is important to me. The other day, do not fly with a 15-month-old. They are just enough of a human to want things, but not enough of a human to communicate with yet. And I was getting quite overwhelmed on a plane. And he reached over, my husband reached over and just starts rubbing this part of my neck. And so I think in this instance, for partners in safe and connected relationships, it's a both and. Polyvagal tools are beneficial for everyone. And when we can teach them to a partner, I think it can strengthen that. But just want to really give the disclaimer that this particular area of trauma is not my expertise. CG asks, oh, sorry, that was a direct message, but it's an initial. So hopefully I did not breach that confidentiality. Would it be possible to get a copy of your slide deck? Jerry, can you send my slide deck out with the email? Awesome. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'll make it as a PDF. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So many wonderful questions. Is DBT training or skills helpful for polyvagal theory? They're different. They're different approaches. They're different modalities. And I am a huge proponent of we all, as mental health care practitioners, should have multiple modalities under our belt. My practice specifically emphasizes like behavior change, polyvagal theory, and IFS. And so we do a lot of overlapping in like somatic parts work and a behavior change focus on just lifestyle management for nervous system support. So with DBT training or skills helpful for polyvagal theory, yeah, I think absolutely having that layered in with polyvagal theory can be incredibly beneficial. And I also trust us as practitioners to be able to source for our client and which modality are they responding best to. And I have yet to find any of our clients personally who are ever like a purist of one modality or the other. And so I think having a skill set and becoming really proficient and then realizing how they complement each other and how that can be applied uniquely to each client is great. And if you've got follow-up question on that, let me know. Does vagal tone affect blood sugar regulation? Yes, because your vagus nerve innervates every single one of your major organs. The functioning of your vagus nerve is going to directly impact the overall functioning of your organs and their ability to regulate your blood sugar. And so there is very few, if any, body systems, physiological functions that are not impacted by improved or damaged vagal tone or lower vagal tone.
Amanda, I have a couple questions in the Q&A. Do you mind me throwing them real quick? Marta's asking, I have a therapy client who gets incredibly anxious just thinking about the breath, major trauma trigger. What other exercises could you recommend?
Yeah. Visual exercises are one of my favorite. So what I love about this, so when you're in a sympathetic activated state, your pupils dilate and your vision gets really, you get very tunnel visioned actually. And so what is a really great entry point is slowly scan the room. And my favorite vision therapy tool to start people on is something called color spotting. And this is in the book as well. So I usually ask the client, pick a color, any color. Whatever color they choose, that's their color. The decision's been made. When they go to this tool, they don't make the decision again. That's their color spotting color. I see you're starting to feel really anxious. Let's go ahead and lift our gaze and just slowly scan the room. And I want you to count or notice or name or pause on all of the green objects that you see. And what this is it's a cognitive distraction while also working with your physiology. You've opened up your vision field. Your peripheral vision, nilch, none, gone, zero when you're in that sympathetic state. So what you're doing is you're opening up kind of this lateral horizontal viewing is really regulating for our system, which is also why scrolling on social media from a physiological standpoint is so stressful because where eyes are in convergence, when our eyes are converged, that's a stress signal. And then up and down is also a repetitive stress signal. So let's open up our vision field, come out of convergence that happens so often when we're on our computers and our phones. And visually, I would test and see how color spotting goes. You can do different somatic practices. You can do a neck massage or an ear massage. You could do an armpit hug, kind of some somatic holding. If they're feeling activated, I'd say, what if you just stood or swayed? Your system is activated, it's mobilized. What if we allowed it to be in a state of mobilization? So those would be some just off the cuff suggestions to maybe try, me knowing nothing else about your client.
Thank you, Amanda. I know we have less than a minute left. Are you able to stay for a few minutes, or should we?
I can, yeah.
So what I would recommend is maybe do your final exercise for those that can't stay, and then maybe stay for a few minutes for more Q&A afterward. Is that okay?
The final exercise that was actually just going to be me reading the final notes of my book. But since you're all going to get the slide deck, these are the last two slides I had. This right here is just very much the energy behind the book, the energy behind who I am as a practitioner. And I'll let you, as you all get the replay for this, read this at your own leisure. And then if you are interested in buying the book, if you go to my website, I created a follow along book course. So it's basically like a personal book club with me where you read a chapter and then you watch a video by me. I also have for the entire chapter 6, which is all these guided practices, for every exercise in that chapter, I've created a follow along video that you can practice yourself, use as a practitioner. And then just this slide here. So again, all of this is going to come to you, but just offering before I stay and answer questions until we run out of time. I'd love for you to tune into my podcast. I would love to hear from you. This is going to take you to the contact page on my website. If you have feedback on the presentation, questions about the book, questions about who I am as a practitioner, the people that I serve, I have other practitioners that I work with on a referral basis. I mentor other practitioners who are looking to integrate more polyvagal theory into the work that they already do in the world. So the sky's the limit. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to be a resource for you. And again, this slide will come to you in the replay. Any other of the questions from the Q&A, Jerry?
Yeah. Can some tools be effective and used as well as proactive and reactive strategies? So some of your tools, can they be used for both
Brilliant.
scenarios?
Yes, and they should be. And I use should lightly because I know should is a shame word. But if you find a practice, if you find a tool that works really well for you reactively, especially if you're a practitioner and this tool works well for your client in session, it might not work as well for them outside of session because they aren't in that co-regulated container. They don't have you to kind of help source for self. And so the idea is that but you can help them in session identify this is a tool that your system has a positive response to, a regulating response to. What if you every morning, let's say it is a neck massage, let's build a proactive practice of the reactive tools that work for you. So when you get up in the morning, while you're brushing your teeth with one hand, let's go ahead and do this. The more often they practice that reactive tool, the stronger that neural pathway is going to become in their brain, the easier they're going to be able to access it in moments of stress. Many of our early clients are like, I know these tools that work for me, but when I need them most, they're gone. And I said, okay, what I think we've been playing is collect as many tools as you can. And instead, what I want to invite you to do is let's find the 2 to 3 tools, maybe, and let's do them a lot. They're like, but I have 10 tools that work. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. You can't use them when you need them. So let's get really familiar with 3 of your high payoff drills so that you actually can use them in the moments that you need them most. And so, yes, especially with vagal toning, and I talk about them here. Vagal toning tools are something that have some of the highest return on reward when used proactively. So a vagal toning tool can work reactively in the moment, like a deep breath, a neck massage, many of the things we've done here. It's just like you want really strong biceps. The thing that builds really strong biceps is consistent reps practiced over time. That's it. That's how muscles work. If you want to improve vagal tone, consistent reps practiced over time, I would say, and creating an environment in which your vagus nerve can be well, is what improves vagal tone. And so thank you for adding that. That's something I could have layered in the earlier conversation, but absolutely, the proactive practice of reactive tools is incredibly needed and beneficial.
Thank you, Amanda. Amanda, I have a question that's coming from me, but I think how would you apply what you're teaching in your book and your very passionate discussion? Thank you for today. How would you apply what you're talking about with neurodivergent or ADHD and some of the stresses that come along with people that are in that world?
Yeah. And this is where you have to color everything through your personal lived experiences. So with somebody who has ADHD or neurodivergent community, how you educate is going to look different. So it might need to come in a different order. It might need to come in different size chunks. It might need to come in a different way. Are they more experiential? Is it more visual? What is engaging? But I do still stand firmly on that pyramid if there needs to be some psychoeducation. How does this person learn best? So that's the first part. And then there can be some interoceptive challenges for the neurodivergent community with ADHD. And so figuring out where you can build awareness around, hey, you struggle with hunger cues. So we worked with a client who was on the autism spectrum. And for them, that interoceptive awareness of hunger was just never, they felt like it was never accurate. And so instead of trying to force that cue to be more accurate, we just built in the context of what if that cue is never accurate? And how can you get your needs met? What are the things that need to be in place? What does this look like? And so it's really, really unique. And some of the basic physiology pieces remain, right? Bodies need to move. They need to rest. They need to be nourished. And so when we can look at general lifestyle, what of those pieces are in place? What are the barriers to getting some of those pieces in place based on your specific needs? And so I think the same thing applies, just how we go about that needs to look unique to the individuals. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
I know we're now 6 minutes over. I don't know how much time you have, but I think we could talk to you all afternoon. But maybe we should come to a goodbye. And yes, the recording will be available. I think my colleague Caroline will be sending that out probably tomorrow, Caroline. I'm not sure. But anyhow, Amanda, do you have any final thoughts for us to wrap this up?
I would say if your question didn't get answered, I would love send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email. I'd love to continue building relationships with other practitioners, supporting individuals. And so just follow up either via email or find me somewhere on the internet. I'm a lot of places. And I would love to connect and to answer and to make what's in this book as personally applicable to each of you, each of the people that you serve and work with as possible. So just a big thank you for the work that I know so many of you do in the world, and for spending so much time with me here today. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you, Amanda. And I will extend, without talking to the rest of the Polyvagal Institute team, that please come back because you've been really wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, take care.